Hello, all of you beautiful people out there. Now, hold on. Before the video starts, I want to show you guys an image real quick. An image that, when you first see it, I want to see if you guys can guess what it is. Simple, right? And if you get it wrong, that's okay. I don't expect you to get it right. So here it is. Boom. Okay. Now, when you first see this image, what do you think right away? Do you think it's a weapon, a tool, a dangerous looking thing? Well, no, actually. This is garbage. Apparently. Okay, jokes aside, with the next Super Smash Bros. Character possibly coming out at around E3, I decided to take this opportunity to put every single Super Smash Bros. Character within the roster in one of three classes of fighting styles: Brawler, Sword Fighter, and Gunner. Now already you're thinking, well, not every single Super Smash Bros. Character is gonna fit into those specific categories. I personally don't want to go through a Magic class, a Ninja class, and honestly, whatever the heck Mr. Game & Watch would fit in. But I'm going to do my best to put every single one in only those three.
Okay.
And at the end of the video, all the numbers are going to be tallied up to see how many of what class gets the most. And the winner wins, well, they win nothing. Let's get started. Alright, so to kick it off, we're going to start with the N64 cast. The 12 that started it all. Or actually 13, but we'll get to that. So to start off, we have Mario. Now already right away, Mario is no duh a brawler. I know he has like projectiles like his Flood, if you count that, and obviously his fireballs, but his overall combat and aerials kind of revolve around the brawler kind of isk sort of persona. What? Anyway, so yeah, I definitely say like Mario is more of a brawler than anything. Next up is DK, and 100% DK is a brawler as well. He has no sort of weaponry or whatnot except those big guns of his. So obviously with his spikes and his moveset pretty much revolves around a brawler, so there's Donkey Kong. Next up is Link. Now 100% Link is a sword fighter class, or belongs into there, due to him wielding a sword for most of his moves. I know his specials revolve around with his boomerang, bow and arrow, and you know, whatnot, of all the gadgets and gizmos that he has. But overall, his skill, he is a swordsman. Moving on to Samus. Now, obviously, Samus is a gunner. It has missiles, has projectiles, and even some of its aerials, some of her aerials are, you know, explosive gun blasts and stuff. Now, although her general kind of combat is on the brawler state, she has a cannon on her arm. So she's a gunner. Next is Dark Samus. I don't need to say much about her. She is a gunner as well. Next up is Yoshi. Now, obviously, Yoshi is also a brawler, with mainly his kicks and using his tail for a lot of moves. He has a projectile with his up special throwing an egg, but honestly, he's a brawler, 100%. Kirby. Now, Kirby is an interesting case in my opinion. Kirby kind of wields like the cutter, his hammer, and turns into a rock. And I don't know if that qualifies as a brawler thing, but I'm gonna put Kirby in the brawler class due to him mainly with his combat using his like little fists. If you even call those, like what are those? And his little feet. Next up is Fox. Now, in my opinion, Fox is 100% a brawler, no doubt. And the reason for that is that he does use his gun, but honestly, that's just one projectile. His aerials and grabs and moves mainly around using like his legs or kicking and punching and stuff. Mostly kicking though, mostly kicking. Next up is Pikachu. Pikachu is 100% going to be in the brawler class, 100%. He does use electrical sort of attacks or kind of uses like Thunderbolt or Thunder Jolt or whatnot. Correct, he does not use Thunderbolt, sorry. But mainly he's more of a physical attacker. Moving on is Luigi. Now Luigi is kind of similar to Mario where he has some specials that are like projectiles like his fireball, or when he uses his grab, his plunger has a hit stun as well. But him as a character with his moveset, he's obviously a brawler. We don't need to get into that. Moving on to Ness. Now Ness, in my opinion, he is a brawler. Now, I know he has his PK Fire, PK Thunder, PK Flash, and those are mainly like his projectile moves. But overall with his combat, he does use his like magic PSI sort of abilities for close combat rather than just camping at a distance. Although he is very hated for almost using PK Fire every single flippin' time. But I'm definitely going to put him into the brawler simply because he doesn't fit like a gunner role, in my opinion. Captain Falcon, also 100% a brawler, like his Falcon Kick, Falcon Punch. No, 100% he's a gunner. Put him in that class. Stupid. Next up is Jigglypuff. Now, 100% Jigglypuff is a brawler as well, due to like having rollout or pound. Jigglypuff is mainly a physical attacker as well, so that suits Jigglypuff quite well. Moving on to Melee, we have Peach. Now starting off with Peach, I'm going to put Peach in the brawler section as well, due to her using like her legs for a lot of things, and I know she wields like her sports equipment for her forward smash, but putting her in a swordsman sort of class would just be ridiculous. Next up is Daisy, and the exact same thing with Peach, like it's the same moveset with a little bit of Daisy touch to it. So again, in the brawler class. Moving on to Bowser, he is also in the brawler class as well. He only has one projectile with his flamethrower, so that doesn't count as anything. And honestly, with his big heavy moves, he's close combat, big heavy guy, he's a brawler. Moving on to Ice Climbers. Now this is where things get a little bit tricky. I wouldn't say Ice Climbers is a sword fighter because it wields hammers more than having a sword. So if I were to put Ice Climbers in a sort of category, maybe sword fighter, maybe, but I think with mollywopping people with a club rather than slicing people with hammers, I'm gonna put Ice Climbers in the brawler. I'm not gonna make a hammer section because you only have like at least 2 characters. More on that when we get to the next character. Next character is Chic. Now Chic, I'm putting Chic in the brawler section due to her using like her legs and arms and whatnot with basic combat like that. She's more of a ninja, but at the same time, I'm working with 3 classes, okay? Give me a Next up is Zelda. Yeah, this is where things get ridiculous. So I guess kind of similar to Ice Climbers, she's more of a magic wielder. So putting her as a like gunner or sword fighter or brawler makes no sense whatsoever. But if I were to pick one, I would put her in the brawler section because she does use her legs and her arms for certain attacks like conjuring up a flame or spiking her with that magical kick of hers. So I'll put her in the brawler section. Next up is Dr. Mario, and similar to the regular Mario, also going into the brawler class due to it having a moveset that's close combat. Pichu, next up Pichu, is going to go into the brawler section as well. Similarly to Pikachu that, has jolts of lightning, but still using its arms, legs, head. Overall, it's a brawler-like character. Next up is Falco, and we're also putting Falco in the brawler section. Due to him mainly having good aerials in the air with his kicks and using its wings to slice up opponents, mainly a brawler. Next up is Marth, and there we go, the first Fire Emblem character that started it all. Now 100% Marth goes into the sword fighter class due to it having every single one of its moves, aerials, specials, using a sword. And going into Lucina as well, she wields a sword, the exact same moveset like Marth, so another sword fighter there. Moving on to Young Link. Young Link is a sword fighter. Same thing with Link, where it has like certain projectiles and tools, but its main combat revolves around him swinging his sword a lot. Next up is Ganondorf. Now, right away, Ganondorf belongs into the brawler section, but he uses his smash attacks with his sword, right? True, but mainly his aerials, grabs, and basic combat, he uses, and even his specials, he uses like his legs for kicking and his arms for like punching or like force palming people. Next up is Mewtwo. Now 100% Mewtwo is going to go into the brawler section because I wouldn't call him a gunner with his projectiles because he only has like 2 with his grab and his neutral special. But overall, Mewtwo, if I were to make him another section, it would be like the magic or PSI. sort of class, but again, I only have 3. Do not give me guff. Next up is Roy. Now, 100% Roy, same like Marth and Lucina, is another sword fighter that has sword-based moves. That is a sword fighter. Chrom, one of the best Fire Emblem characters in my opinion, no offense. Chrom is definitely a sword fighter because it's the Echo Fighter of Roy, so we don't need to get too much into that. Moving on to Brawl, Mr. Game & Watch is kind of a interesting sort of character. I'm definitely going to put Mr. Game & Watch with his, even with his bunch of knickknacks and weapons and stuff that he uses, I'm putting him in the Brawler just to keep it simple. Because he does use things like his hammer or his parachute, a bucket of oil, and other stuff. But if I were to put him in one, it would have to be Brawler, because the other two just don't work. Moving on to Meta Knight, I would say Meta Knight is more of a Brawler. Wow, okay. So moving on to Meta Knight is 100% a swords fighter. A swords fighter. Meta Knight is a sword fighter, 100%. His moveset, his basic combat, like, it just screams sword. Pit, I'd say Pit is also a sword fighter as well. Dude having dual-wielding swords and turns into like this weird sword-like staff. So definitely Pit is a sword fighter. And also with Dark Pit, don't really need to argue that much because Dark Pit's also a sword fighter as well. Zero Suit Samus, I'm going to put her in the... Zero Suit is hard, because even though she uses her kicks in combat, she definitely is more of like a brawler rather than a gunner, because I know she has her gun, but I would definitely say Zero Suit is more of a brawler than a gunner. So I think with her moveset, I'm going to put her in the brawler class. I'm sorry. She has a gun, but a gunner per se, not enough. Wario is 100% a brawler, 100%. With his movesets consisting of like slapping, punching, and other stuff, he definitely is a brawler for sure. I know he has his motorcycle, his farts, and biting people, but even biting is a brawling like strategy, I think at least. Moving on to Snake, I'm going to put Snake in the gunner sort of section, but only because even though he has some special moves that aren't projectile wise, like his grenades, he chucks them, but that's not really a projectile. But I'm putting him in because his up smash, for example, is a projectile for like almost like a gun rocket launcher thing. So definitely in the gunner section I'd put him. Moving on to Ike, he's obviously a sword fighter, you can't really deny that. He's got a big gigantic sword, and his moveset revolves around the sword. It's a Fire Emblem character, what do you expect? Moving on to Pokemon Trainer, I would personally say of Squirtle, Ivysaur, and Charizard that they all belong in the brawler-like scenario. I know they have certain projectiles, 1 or 2 moves, but their basic combat revolves around brawling. Moving on to Diddy Kong, 100% a brawler. Even though he has his peanut gun which is a gun-like thing, Diddy Kong's moveset mainly revolves around hitting, smacking you, grabbing you. He's a brawler. Following up with Lucas is also a brawler. Even though similar things like Ness with projectiles, I'm still gonna say he's a brawler because he just doesn't have that gunner feeling, but you can definitely argue if he would be in a gunner sort of case. Moving on to Sonic is 100% a brawler. Like, with his speed and punching, he's a brawler, 100%. King Dedede, next. Once again with the Ice Climbers. Gross. I'd have to say he's definitely kind of like in a brawler sword fighter conundrum. To Ice Climbers, he'd have his own thing as hammers. But like I said with Ice Climbers, I'm just gonna put it into the brawler class for now because he definitely has some sort of brawling mechanisms to him. Moving on to Olimar. Olimar using Pikmin definitely is still a brawler. Like, definitely like throws Pikmin, throws it like projectiles, but mainly his combat or aerials revolve around using those Pikmin to hit people. So brawler for Olimar. Next up is Lucario, 100% a brawler, uses aura, like, can't really argue that, so he's a brawler. Not much else to say about that. Now, Rob, I'm gonna have to also say brawler. What? Because even though he has 2 key projectiles that people use a lot when playing this character, mainly his combat and aerials and stuff and grabs mainly revolve around combat fighting. or brawling. Toon Link, same thing as Young Link and Link. He has a sword, but wields other like projectiles or accessories, his utensils, his gear, his knickknacks, his knickety-knacks that he uses, but he's still a sword fighter. Wolf is also a brawler. One gun projectile, but still not enough to make him a gunner. He is a brawler. Moving on to the Wii U and 3DS, Smash 4 with an unofficial flippin' title. Moving on to Villager, I'd say Villager seems more of a gunner role than less of a brawler. Now, definitely this can be argued because there's a good chunk of his aerials that are more brawl-like. But I gotta say his back air, forward air, and some of his specials revolve around projectile things. Even if you cut down his tree, it kind of like launches the tree, like kind of over a bit. Okay, maybe that's overstepping it, alright? Maybe it is. You know what, my rules, if I'm gonna make Villager, I'll make him a gunner. How about that? Moving on to Mega Man. Mega Man is 100% gunner. Projectiles, aerials, like seriously, this guy screams, oozes projectiles. He's a gunner. Moving on to Wii Fit Trainer. Wii Fit Trainer is definitely a brawler. Due to it having like exercise sort of functions and stuff like that, Wii Fit Trainer still like has this physical body to her, and she mainly uses like exercise poses to fight. Moving on to Rosalina and Luma, I'm gonna say she's a brawler. She definitely has some projectiles launching Luma, or her side B where it does these star projectiles and whatnot. But if I were to say for Rosalina and Luma, it's definitely a brawler case due to it being still close combat and just all around brawling mechanisms to her. Little Mac is a sword fighter. Next up is Greninja. Now I'm gonna put Greninja into the brawler case, similar to what Chic is, more of like a ninja, fast moves and whatnot. So I definitely say Greninja is more of a brawler rather than a sword or gunner, that's for sure. Even though he wields water kunai, that doesn't prove anything. Next up is Palutena. Now Palutena is kind of a interesting character. I'd say like with her staff and magic stuff, I guess you could say she's a gunner in a sense, due to her having like notable projectiles and whatnot. But the staff isn't a sword and she doesn't have enough to become a gunner. Brawler goes for Palutena. Next up is Pac-Man. Pac-Man is a brawler. I know he has projectiles with his fire hydrant and his launching of his neutral special, but basic combat, he's definitely a brawler. Moving on to Robin. I'd say Robin is 100% going into the sword fighter class, due to its main combat and aerials kind of revolve him using the sword. So it only makes sense to put him in the sword fighting class. I know he has his specials with like projectiles and kind of other magic tricks and knickknacks, but similar to Link, Young Link, and Toon Link, those are just his specials. His overall combat is his sword. Moving on to Shulk, the guy who wields the Monado lightsaber of destiny, is 100% a sword fighter. Like, there's no doubt about that. Moving on to Bowser Jr. and the Koopalings, I'd say Bowser Jr. and them are a little bit tricky. If I were to put them in a class, I would say brawler, but with them having such notable projectiles, it could be in a gunner case. But due to this, I'm gonna say that they are mainly in the brawler class. Moving on to Duck Hunt, I would say Duck Hunt is 100% a brawler, especially with the duck being so feisty. Even though their specials revolve around like projectiles most of the time, its main combat, again, is brawler type. Ryu, it's Street Fighter. He's a fighter. He's going into the brawler class. You can't really deny that. And same goes for Ken. Like you can't really fight the fact that they're both fighter brawler characters. Next up is Cloud. 100% Cloud's going into the sword fighter class due to it having a gigantic sword. Next up is Corrin. Once again, another Fire Emblem character that 100% is going into the sword fighter class as well. I know a lot of Fire Emblem characters pretty much use a sword. Every single Fire Emblem character does. What are you gonna do about it? Next up is Bayonetta. Now, personally for me, I'm gonna put her in the brawler section. She does use her guns for a lot of things, but trash will always be trash. I don't like her, so we're gonna put her in Brawler. Fight me. Next up is Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, the final game. Hot darn. Inkling. Inkling is... I'm going to say Inkling is a brawler, but the reason for that is because Inkling does have her like the splatter shot, splat bomb, and other projectile things that she can do, but overall, her aerials and grabs mainly revolve her kicking and smacking you, especially with her gun or jabbing her with her hand. Next up is the big boy Ridley. Now I'd say Ridley is a brawler 100%, due to him mainly using like combat skills with like his tail or his claws or biting down. So I guess that could be a class, like just claws. Or unless that's a sword fighter thing. No, I'm gonna put Ridley into the brawler case. Okay, so Simon and Richter. These two Mujombos, I'm gonna be a jerk and I'm putting them in the gunner section. Why? Because their whips are so long and their projectiles, almost all their specials are projectiles. Except their up special. But besides that, they're 100% like projectile characters. And they have long range with their aerials and like their smash attacks. I'm gonna put them in the gunner section. You're definitely gonna disagree with me, but just the way that they play is gunner. King K Rool. I'm putting him in the brawler section due to his combat is mainly up close and just bashing them with this big heavy body. I know he has his crown and the blunderbuss, but besides those two, he doesn't really have much of gun-like stuff. Next is Isabel. Remember when I said Villager was more of like a gunner case? I'm gonna say Isabel is more of on the brawler side. Even though its aerials have its back air and forward air as a projectile, its other specials are mainly like grabbing or like smacking you. So I'm definitely gonna say Isabel's in the brawler side. I'm sorry. Incineroar, 100% a brawler, like Macho Libre, Macho Man. He's definitely a brawler. Piranha Plant, I'm gonna put in the brawler case. I don't know. His Spike Ball and Poison are projectiles wise, but again, his basic combat is more on the line of brawler aspects. Moving on to Joker, I'd say Joker is more of a brawler. But the reason why I say this is because Joker does have his Iha and his gun. But besides those two, his main combat is with his knife or his kicks and stuff. No, I'm not putting him in the sword fighter class. That's dumb. That's a knife, not a sword. Although I could put that in the sword wielding class. But again, almost like DDD's Hammer and Ice Climbers, they could have been in the sword kind of category wielding a weapon. But too bad, my rules, my list. Even though a bunch of you might disagree. Leave in the comments all the hate that you possibly can. Moving on to Hero, or Goku. I'd say that Hero is definitely a sword fighter. His moveset revolves around using his sword a lot. Banjo and Kazooie are brawlers, 100% with their aerials, smash attacks. Kazooie is very feisty. Terry, similar to Ryu and Ken, is a fighting-like character, so 100% Terry goes into the brawler class. Byleth is a sword fighter, but at the same time, he's an axe wielder, and a spear wielder, and a bow wielder. He's a multi-weapons character, alright? But I'm putting him in the sword fighter class due to wielding a sword at all times. Min Min. I am so tempted to put her in the gunner seat. But no, Min Min's a brawler, just at a very long distance. And also, I just want to note this. For forward smash attacks, it went from Marth's forward smash, to Shulk's forward smash, to Corrin's forward smash, to Simon's forward smash. Byleth's is pretty long, but like, wasn't as impressive. And then Min Min's just got the longest range of anyone. Moving on to Steve, I'm putting him in the brawler section. I don't care. I know he wields a sword, but of his other specials, I'd say, and he can still break his weapons, so he can still fight you with his fist. Even though he'd be mining and get weapons otherwise, I'm still putting him in the brawler class. Sephiroth, 100% a sword fighter. Like, he's got the longest sword out of Smash Brothers, so he's definitely a sword fighter. He's also really handsome for some reason. I just can't. Moving on, we have Pyro and Mithra. Both of them are obviously, like, they're both sword fighters. Yep, another sword fighter. What are you gonna do? Also the best character in the game. don't hate me. And me Brawler is obviously a gunner. And me Sword Fighter is a brawler. And me Gunner is obviously a sword fighter. And of course, I can't tell what random goes into play. But I'm just gonna give... Yeah, random's not really in anything. I just wanted to include him. I love you, buddy. And there you have it. That is every single Smash Brothers character up to date of each different kind of fighting specialty class. I know there were so many oddballs that made no sense, but I tried to cram them in the best of my ability. But I think generally this video is mainly about stop complaining if there is another sword fighter character. I mean, look at the list. I mean, it's pretty much like that proves that you're overacting, or just there's so many sword fighter characters. Like, do you want more gunners? Do you want more brawlers then? Do you want more of that? Or it's just not even that. You just want your favorite Super Smash Bros. Character to get in. Which, there's nothing wrong with that, but again, I just try to encourage everyone to not be too upset or angry if it's a sword fighter character. You can say that you either hate this or you love this, and then just let it all slide. But thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.